a lullaby. Somewhere over the rain.
At the age of 10, you, the original Little Beaver, at age 10.
Yep. The good old days.
How did you get that?
Well, I came out here with my folks from Minnesota. My dad was very sick. Of course, in Duluth, Minnesota, it's frigid.
Duluth.
Yeah. And doctor said, you need a change of climate. And so we came out here, and evidently, there was a big automobile accident when we were driving, and I have no memory prior to that automobile accident. I was about five and a half years old. I have a great memory, but no memory. But they tell me that when I was real young back in Minnesota, I used to entertain my grandmother, putting on outfits, and she had, I think, Parkinson's disease, the creeping paralysis, and they say that I used to entertain her and put on acts, and then at some function that I attended with my folks, I got up on a table and started dancing. My mother always loved the theater. She used to invite those little repertory companies, you know. She used to invite the actors to come over for tea and crumpets and stuff, you know. And my dad, when he went to Harvard, he used to go into New Haven and see the plays, and he would critique and write to his mother. I still have the letters, beautiful, beautiful letters. So anyway, my mom must have seen some talent in me. And we got out here, she took me over to the Pasadena Playhouse.
Oh, that's
And I did 7 straight plays there. First play, Peter Goes to the Fair, directed by Betty Smith. I had a photographic memory, just a God-given gift. I knew everybody's lines. I used to cue everybody.
Did you really?
And then I stayed there on all their stages, the main stage, Gilmer Brown's play box. We did Something in the Sky with George Reeves, a young George Reeves who was Superman, the original Superman. And then there was an advertisement in a magazine to have a free audition at NBC, the Artist Bureau. May Regan ran it, Sunset and Vine, the good old NBC studios. My mom took me there. They recorded my voice. A couple of weeks later, I was called in to audition for Arch Oboler. Arch Oboler...
He's the one who discovered you.
He discovered me in the halcyon days of radio. Norman Corwin, Orson Welles, and Arch Oboler. They were the big three. They were the Steven Spielbergs.
At NBC.
At NBC.
That's right.
So they called me back to audition for a part in his weekly show, Everyman's Theater, on NBC. Gordon Jenkins doing the music, the greatest stock company of radio actors. And I got the role only because I had the youngest sounding voice. And he had to have a little German accent. And I've always, for some reason, I
had
could
accents.
I don't know where I ever heard German, but I played a little German boy, you know. My mother had to pay the page boy $5 to tell him what a cue was. I don't know what a cue was. They put me on this box. I'm this big on a box to stand up with a gooseneck mic. And so I started. That was my first show with Arch on radio.
On radio.
And then he called me back to do a couple of shows. And on one of the shows, Alla Nazimova, the great Russian actress, was starred in it. Now the show finishes, we all come out, and Arch says, God bless it. He's speaking to Alla. He says, I got to go to Chicago. I got to do this show. I got to go there to do the show. It's about this young kid and stuff. He says, I like the show, but I don't want to travel. Nazimova says, what do you need to go to Chicago? Little Tommy Cook. Get him to do it. So he decides to do it. And that was the first show I starred, called Problem Papa. My parents, Mercedes McCambridge and Howard Duff,
Mercedes Cambridge.
were my parents in that show. Gordy Jenkins doing the music, Elliot Lewis, Hans Conried, you know, the greatest.
How long did that show last?
Well, Everyman's Theater, that was a whole series that lasted for a couple of years. And then he did Plays for Americans during the war effort, the Second World War effort. And I starred in one of those shows, Paul Reversky. And it was a kid, his father told him, America's in deep trouble, and everybody has to do their part. And you've got to get in, you've got to help. So little Paul, he goes and he tries to enlist in the Marine Corps. Go away, laddie boy. He tries to enlist in the Air Force, in the Army. Nobody will have him. He ends up in the park, and this conscientious objector, Hans Conried, has just gotten a letter. He's drafted, and he's PO'd.
Right.
Why? War effort. I've never done anything. I've never hurt anybody. I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't belong here. I don't do this.
Right.
And finally the kid realizes that this is a letter to get into the Army. He said, yeah, give me the letter. That's what I want. Nobody has taken me in. I want to go in the Army. My dad says we've got to do something. And he looks at me and he says, kid, just go home. Just go home. And at the end, the kid says, I tried to get in. I tried to get in the Army. Nobody will have me. Gee whiz. And it fades out. But that's the way Obler wrote for the people, for his actors, his stock company. And it wasn't acting. It's like he wrote like it was you know. He wouldn't let me rehearse until the dress rehearsal, because he wanted the natural. He didn't want me to woodshed. He wouldn't let me take a script home, you know. So I came in for the dress rehearsal, and he just believed in me, you know. And he wrote.
And you had a live audience, too.
No, those dramatic shows.
Dramatic shows now?
No, the dramatic shows. I was under contract to all 3 networks, NBC, ABC. I was Little Beaver in the Red Ryder radio show. That was the old blue ABC network.
This is where it began, though. Come on, this. Little Beaver.
Yeah. I was the first Little Beaver in the films. Robert Blake was the second.
But it was just, what kind of a film? It was a
serial.
Serial every Saturday.
Every Saturday there was another chapter. I used to take my kids on the block, and we would go to the Granada Theater in Inglewood, 25 cents, and we would see a different episode each Saturday morning. Yeah, Old Republic Studios.
That was at Republic Studios. Who directed those?
William Whitney and John English. I used to go riding at William Whitney's house, and a little pinto pony that he had there, similar to Papoose.
You did have a ride, too.
You had to ride that horse. I rode.
Look at you here with Roddy McDowall.
Roddy McDowall. What a beautiful human being.
You two were child actors.
Yeah, that was at NBC. We did publicity, yeah.
He did a lot of radio shows, too.
I don't know. Of course, How Green Was My Valley and those classic films at 20th Century Fox. I don't know to what extent Roddy, I never worked with him in radio. But
did you enjoy doing radio at the time when you were a kid?
The best medium of all. You have one shot. You're doing it. Of course, you know, in those days, you would do a show. If it was a national radio show, not regional, you would do one late in the afternoon for the East Coast audience, and you'd come back at 7:30 and do it for the West Coast audience. The greatest people I ever worked with were in radio.
Were they?
Yeah, I did 3,000 radio shows.
Look at that stars you met, though.
Joey Brown,
Joey Brown, he was a great radio guy.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this.
Yeah, I loved him.
How old were you, 10 here? 10?
Yeah, I was probably 11 or 12. I was 10 when I did the film, and then I was probably 12, 13. I did Little Beaver on the radio until I just got too old for it. I did it 3 or 4 years.
Is this who Rudy Valley I'm thinking
of?
Is this Rudy Valley?
Yeah,
I interviewed
absolutely.
him just before.
It was when he was in the service.
You also were in the service.
Marine Corps.
Marine Corps.
Down at Camp Pendleton.
And this is you in the radio days with Gary Cooper. Look at
Gary Cooper. This was the pride of the Yankees.
The pride of the Yankees.
And in the background is Walter Brennan. And, you know, some of the great actors in films could barely speak on radio. Yeah, they just did. And Gary Cooper was not one of the great ones.
On the radio.
And Barry Fitzgerald I did radio shows with him and Bells of St. Mary, which he won the Academy Award. They weren't great radio actors.
But look at you and Tyrone Power.
This was a classic show. This was in '42.
What was it?
President Roosevelt's 60th birthday.
Right.
Arch Obler wrote, produced, and directed a special called Letter to the President.
Right.
I emceed and introduced every top star in Hollywood, and then I spoke directly to President Roosevelt. And, of course, one of the stars was Tyrone Power. I ended up, in 1950, I was featured with Tyrone Power in a film called American Gorilla in the Philippines. We went to the Philippines.
Right.
And there for 4.5 months shooting. A great experience.
My favorite lady, Screen Actors Guild. I love her, Penny Singleton.
Penny Singleton.
She
I was Alexander on the Blondie radio show with Arthur Lake and Penny at CBS, Studio C, for 2 or 3 years.
She was a great lady.
She was terrific. I got to tell you, fade out, fade in. I did the lead voices on 3 or 4 Hanna-Barbera cartoon series, and they were honoring Joe Barbera and Bill Hanna, and they took us in a bus down to some big ballpark, and they had this huge screen, and they were showing the cartoons, and they had an orchestra there, and they were playing the tunes and everything and showing the cartoons, and then we did little bits, you know, from our cartoon series. We got on the bus. Now, this is 60 years after I played Alexander in the Blondie radio show. And all of a sudden, I looked, and there's Penny. And I put my arms around her, and we're crying, and I said, Penny, Penny. And you know what she said to me? She said, Tommy, I don't know how they put up with me all those years because I gave them such hell on that show. There was a lot. It was the Blondie radio show, but it was really Dagwood. It was Arthur
I remember
Lake,
Arthur
you
Lake.
know.
Yeah, of course.
And there was a lot of antagonism and stuff, and she spoke her mind. She said to me, I don't know how they kept me for so long. I gave them such hell. I said, Penny, you were great. There was never a Blondie. And you know something? Those Blondie pictures kept Columbia alive. Absolutely.
They did.
And you know something? The comic strip. Chick Young did the comic strip for so many years. Now his son does it. I understand they're giving them a 50 years of Blondie and all the comic strips.
I must say, you got a clip of the Little Beaver, and I love to show my audience this clip. This is one of your series clips. Let's show it. Memories, when you look at something like that, what just goes through your mind, Tommy?
Well, you know, I've been a guest at a few Western film festivals. And years ago, I was invited to a festival in North Carolina. My son, at that time, was about 10 years old, and my mother kept my original Little Beaver outfit. I put it on my son, and he came with me to the festival. So we're showing episodes, and they were showing them to all the all the guests that came, and we're in this room, and they're doing it on a 16 millimeter. So they just finished with one of the episodes, and they're rewinding, and they're getting set to do the next episode. So the lights go on, and the person there said, "Well, let's do a little Q&A. Anybody like to ask Mr. Cook a question?" That was the guest there. So somebody asked me a question, and I can't answer. And tears start going down my eyes, and I'm almost breaking down. And I finally got a hold of myself, and I said, I apologize. I'm sorry. But it reminded me, those were the happiest days of my life. I made my folks happy. That we had no problems, and everything was so simple, and I loved everybody. They were so nice to me, and I said, the nostalgia just got me. It got me.
Look at you here. Look at you with my favorite little boy, too. Scotty Beckett.
Scotty Beckett, and Eileen Roberts. Michael O'Halloran. We did that for Sal Lesser Jr. We did it the old
Look at you
studios
three.
out in Culver City.
This is at Monogram, isn't this? I think
It may have been released through Monogram. We shot it at the...
Did you?
Yeah, out at the Culver City studios.
One of my favorite actors, Johnny Garfield. Boy, you got to tell me about this guy, Johnny Garfield.
Oh, was he great?
And
was he great?
This is you?
That's Lorene Tuttle, one of the great radio actresses.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the great radio actresses.
You were doing a radio show here?
It was a special war relief show. For, I guess, the Jewish war relief, going way, way, way back.
Right.
And I starred in the show. Garfield narrated it, and Al Jolson sang.
Oh,
what a...
Great. I didn't know you did Tarzan and the Leopard Woman.
Tarzan and the Leopard
RKO?
Woman.
Yeah. You
Oh,
did?
yeah. Oh,
Look at
yes.
you here.
Yes. Brenda Joyce, Johnny Weissmuller, and Aquanetta played
This is the real Johnny Weissmuller, the original.
Oh, yeah.
These two, Brenda Joyce.
Brenda Joyce at the time.
That's
she
right.
came after Maureen Sullivan.
Sullivan.
Yeah, and Johnny, what was the kid's name? John, oh, gosh.
God, look at you here. You were the Leopard Boy.
Yeah, I was the Leopard Boy, yeah.
I remember you there.
RKO.
We're about the same age, you and I, at that time. I'm thinking about that time, because I came to Hollywood at 9. And you and I, look at you here. I just love this picture. Johnny, tell me about this guy. Johnny
Johnny Sheffield. Yeah, Johnny Sheffield. He was terrific. You know where we shot that film?
Where?
At the Lucky Baldwin Estate, right at Santa Anita Racetrack. They had all this jungles there. We did this right around VJ Day, because we took a day off when the truce was signed and the war was over. And but that's where they just did all the jungle scenes and everything there.
This gorilla. Come on, give me this picture of the gorilla here. Show me. Let's see it. Look at the gorilla there. Tell me about that gorilla. Was he?
Well, I didn't have too much to do with the animals, but when I did Jungle Girl, another Republic series, at Republic, same directors, William Whitney and John English, that did Red Ryder.
That was a great studio, though.
Oh,
Republic was a big studio
they
in
did
the
all
valley.
the top westerns with Gene Autry, Roy Rogers. I did Song of Arizona with Roy Rogers and Dale Evans there years later. But anyway, I just lost my train of thought.
No,
what were we just talking about? Jungle Girl. I had a little chimpanzee that was always on my shoulder, and whenever a young girl would come by, he would get a little excited. We had to, and then he would crap on my. But those were great experiences.
Great memories you have, don't you, about Hollywood?
Yeah.
Growing up.
Oh yeah.
Tyrone Power, tell me about him.
He was a true professional.
He
absolutely.
What do you
true.
mean actually by that?
Well, what I mean is in filming American Gorilla in the Philippines.
Right.
He was an absolute star at that time.
Right,
he was at his zenith in popularity. He was a superstar. When he came to work, he knew all his lines. He never gave anybody any trouble. That's what being a true professional. He was ready to go to work. You didn't need 20 takes with him.
Right.
You could get a good performance in the first or second take, and that's why I call him a true professional.
What have you learned working with such great actors? Because you worked with the best, Tommy.
I have.
You really have.
The first thing I learned is that such a great appreciation for the entertainment profession. I've been a member of the Motion Picture Academy for so many years. I was brought in by Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh when they were married, and you have to have a certain amount of credits and you have to be voted on. I've such a great organization. But I've always come awards time, and somebody wins the statue and they get up and they want to thank their agents and this person and that person and everybody in the world, I'd like for once for them to say, I want to give thanks to the greatest profession in the world, the greatest artists, the most creative people, the nicest people in all the crafts that make up our business. I want to thank them because it's been a privilege to work in such a great atmosphere.
The actors.
Yeah.
Just the actors.
Yeah. The actors, what I've learned, well, you know, I taught acting at one time years and years
Did you
ago at the
really?
American National Theater Academy. I taught adults, and I had a children's class, and I would write little scenes for them, and I put them through improvisations, because with a child, there's such believability, there's such honesty. They haven't learned to have, you know, of all the, to be self-conscious or anything, you know. They're so real, and I enjoyed working with the young kids.
That's what happened to you.
But, and I was a director at the Film Industry Workshop at Columbia Studios. I would direct scenes right on the stage with the cameras, but not with the film. And I remember directing James Brolin before he ever did Marcus Welby with Robert Young. But I'm sort of a visionary. I know what works for audiences. I can see through, I have x-ray eyes, I can see right through an actor, whether he's acting or whether he's really
you can
found
tell,
the
you
layers,
can tell.
found the layers, and can, you know.
You have an eye. You have it or you don't.
You have it or you don't. It's a God-given talent.
Tell me, Tommy, you did Mod Squad. That is your, that is yours.
Let me tell you.
Tell me about that. Mod Squad. Did you?
After the Marine Corps, I made
you left the Marines.
I did a few films, and on the Climax, the live television hour show at CBS, we did The Champion. Roy Calhoun played the Midge Kelly, and I played Arthur Kennedy's, the brother, the crippled brother's role. So I did some nice shows, but I decided that I wanted to go to New York, and I had a meeting with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. He had absolutely no interest in me. He wanted another Marilyn Monroe. So then I went over to see Meisner, the Neighborhood Playhouse, Sandy Meisner, who was wonderful. He accepted me. Then I got a film to go to Colorado and shoot Night Passage with James Stewart and Audie Murphy. I played Audie Murphy's brother. So a few months later I came back, and the session was over with. Anyway, so I come back to L.A., and for some reason, you know, my whole life was as a juvenile actor. I'd done everything as a kid, and in radio, it doesn't matter what you look like, you could play any role. For some reason, Skip, my contemporaries that went on for such glory, like Robert Blake and Dean Stockwell, for some reason, I don't know, because I'm short and tough-looking and stuff, there was doubt in my mind that I was going to continue to make it as an actor. And loving the business and not wanting to get out, I decided maybe I better create a project for myself.
You did.
And so I created a show starring myself called Young Man with a Badge, about a young police officer who could get into the trouble areas where the average policeman couldn't gain access with his puerile face and doing different accents and putting on different makeups, etc. And I sold the show to NBC, to their syndicated division, California National. At that time, there was a long writer's strike that lasted for 10 weeks. When writer's strike was over with, my show went right down the tubes. I had picked the brain of a detective buddy of mine to find out the inner workings of the police force. I showed him my pilot script. He takes my pilot script and he gets a meeting with Aaron Spelling, and he pitches my show. Aaron loves the idea. He gives it the title Mod Squad, which is a better title than my Young Man with the Badge, and that's what happened. Buddy Ruskin, he's passed away now.
But I must say, I want to go, because we don't have much time, I want to go into the sex, the challenge of the sexes.
Challenge of the sexes,
Yeah,
well, I've always been involved in tennis.
You're a tennis player. Very important.
I was a junior tennis champion, and I taught tennis to. But
Bobby
Riggs
and
Billie Jean King. 1971.
Go ahead.
I saw there was a big tournament. We used to have our biggest tennis tournament, the LA Tennis Club. Now it's over at UCLA. Anyway, Jack Kramer was the tournament director. They were paying X amount of dollars like this to the men, and the women were getting that much money. There was great animosity between Billie Jean King and Jack Kramer. Now, there's a match on center court, and one of the linesmen is falls asleep, doesn't call a shot.
Right.
Billie Jean and Rosie Casals, who are playing, are going bananas. They asked Jack Kramer to come in and get rid of the guy. He wouldn't get rid of him. They said, we're not going to continue with the match. Jack says, you don't continue, you're defaulted, and you don't get your prize money. They were defaulted. I saw that. I saw that. And I said,
hey, let's have a battle.
Let's have a battle.
That's right.
And I signed Bobby Riggs to play Billie Jean King, 10,000, winner take all. And I also signed Jack Kramer to play Billie Jean King, 25,000, winner take all, because I didn't know whether the general audience, they weren't really, weren't into Bobby Riggs at the time, but Jack Kramer was the world champion, etc. Anyway, my option runs out. Bobby challenges the women through the press. Margaret Court, the great world's champion from Australia, takes him up on it. They go down to San Diego Country Estates. They play the match. Bobby psychs her out of it. Jerry Perenchio comes in and signs Bobby. They become partners in the battle of the sexes at the Houston Astrodome. The largest audience in tennis history. 50 million people watched it. I came in with Starship One with 16 celebrities, ran the celebrity portion for Jerry, which you never saw on ABC. But I got the last laugh.
You certainly did.
I sold Challenge of the Sexes to CBS. We were had nominated for Emmys for 3.5 years. And then we went into Celebrity Challenge of the Sexes, the 2-hour primetime specials. So our first show was the highest rated show of the week. I had Bill Cosby playing tennis against Farrah Fawcett when they were at their zenith popularity on television. Those were good times.
Tennis is your real love.
Well, it's my avocation.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The business of
I love to show the clip of The
films.
Vicious Years, but we're signing off right now, and I really love this movie, The Vicious Years.
This was.
What's your favorite film you've done? I know you've done so many.
I won the Photoplay Award.
You did for Vicious Years?
For The Vicious Years. Photoplay was the forerunner of People magazine, the same kind of magazine in those bygone days, and Richard Nash, who wrote The Rainmaker, wrote this film. Music by Emil Newman, who was part of the Newman family. Newman was head of music at NBC and won so many. Alfred Newman won so many Academy Awards.
You and Dean Martin.
Dean Martin. I used to teach tennis at
Dean
their
Martin
house.
and you. Look at that. Oh, wow.
They were wonderful.
Was
Jeannie
a
Martin.
wonderful man, Dean Martin. I love him.
He was great. But Jeannie Martin was like my agent, you know.
She was?
Oh, she used to. I taught there night and day and brought me all my
You keep in good
clients.
shape, don't you, Tommy? You really
I'm in pretty good shape.
You got to come back.
You're big 7'5", not too bad. You and I are the same age.
Same
hey,
age.
you've done great too.
You know something? We got to do another show because we don't have time to show.